We're here. Welcome. Welcome to the Amplifying Muted Voices podcast. We are in my chat room. My name is Carol Ann Whitehead. I am trustee and head of EDI for 50/50 Parliament, and I'm head of EDI for this particular campaign, Amplifying Muted Voices. I'm really excited because I have two fabulous guests in my green room. I'm going to bring them out one by one because I think what we need to do is give them their own time basking in the sun. And my first guest is Elizabeth Cameron. Is she there in my green room? Let me just see if I can find her. There you are. Ah!
Hello, you.
Oh my goodness, looking fabulous. How are you?
Thank you so much, Carol Ann. I'm very well, thank you.
Well, before we get started, let me just set the scene in relation to Amplifying Muted Voices. This is episode 2. And if anybody doesn't understand or know about Amplifying Muted Voices, it's funded by the Rosa Fund. And it's a series of events, podcasts and webinars to empower Northern, underrepresented, Black, Asian and minority ethnic female change makers. And along with our allies, women who don't identify as women of colour, and as well as men, 50/50 Parliament is passionate about ensuring broader range of voices within our elected bodies, and we're using these events to empower the women. So you've been a busy bee because last month you joined me on the panel for the soft launch of AMV, and the soft launch was Well-Behaved Women Seldom Make History, which is perfect for you, isn't it?
Listen, I have that book behind me. It's a book. And I got it for Christmas of one of my daughters. You tend to see it made it up into a postcard, and I mean it describes me to a T. It's a real validating phrase, and so I loved that you asked me to be there for that, under that banner, really. And then, of course, I saw this esteemed panel, most of whom I knew, which gave double credibility to it for me, because these are women who have not only navigated the political space, but also, I suppose, the activist space, in terms of I knew that they had real founding, real good reputations in the community for the work that they do. Yeah, particularly women's organisations, seeing people who work for the Pankhurst Centre, and Gail's an old friend. We've done lots of cross paths.
That's Gail Heath, the CEO of the Pankhurst Trust, including Women's Aid. But I want to ask you, you're not a politician. You might as well be, because you are. No, in a positive. This is a positive comment here.
Oh, good.
Because you're the kind of woman that we're trying to appeal to as well. You're I call you a disruptor for good. You're a change maker. You're a mover, and basically you're the kind of person we're trying to appeal to, as in amplify your voice, but also be an amplifier for us. 50/50 that amplifier, and the women that you come across, pass that baton down and get them to raise their voice and amplify their voice, and move towards getting into the council chambers and Parliament as well.
You say that beautifully,
tell us about
Carol Ann. That you really do say that beautifully. What's your question? Sorry, what were you saying?
Well, tell us about your journey and what does inclusive look like to you.
I mean, it's quite funny because we have my actual active involvement really with the political party I represent, that I'm not talking about, but it was because of my involvement with the trade unions. So I was a full-time worker for the council. There's an elected position, which is a link between that party and the trade unions. And it's to keep their feet on the ground, to remind them that's what they were set up for. And so we have this relationship where we can input into the things that they do. So that elected person is allowed to go to local council meetings and to be able to say their piece, really, as it things are impacting people in the direct communities that we're dealing with. So for that case, it would have been the workers of that city where I was working, and it would have been the communities around there. So I was able to say, you know, some really powerful things, bring in some of the work that we had been doing to work out the profile of the city, what was needed, chart poverty, things like air quality, things like that. We really pushed on the needs of the people who we were serving, who were our members.
That's great. And so that, you know, I've seen many official picture of you at a podium, mouth open positively, hand in the air, pointing, and just, you know, just looking amazing.
I don't know about the looking amazing. Exactly. They're unfortunate pictures, Carol Ann, and I don't mind saying so. Mostly they see me with a furrowed brow. There's not many smiles in there. And kind of saying, sock it to me. Because, you know, if I take that example, and it is a funny story. So having got involved in that way, the person who was in charge of the meeting that I used to turn up to, I started getting emails, but I didn't understand what I was getting. So there was one that was saying branch, there's one that's saying the council, and another one that's saying CLP. I don't know what CLP stands for at this point. I don't know what branch, schmanch, I don't know. And I just kept going along. If I could go, I said something, and I pretty much am just bringing whatever issues are going on at that time, always relevant, but, you know, things about women, things about children, things about provision, communities, nurseries, as I say, day centres. You know, I championed the things around SEN. I was a school governor at that time for a school in the city, and a link governor for another school in the city. So I was bringing back what was coming through there. And somebody decided from that group to say to me, you should stand for such a position in the council. So I've been going there for maybe a year, 2 years. And I mean, I practically knew no people's names. I just used to fly in there, say my bit, listen to what they said. Usually it wasn't on my point. And then I'd leave, and I'd never know whether they really did things about what I was saying. But the important thing was, these people got behind me and told me to stand for a position, and it would be easy, and they would help me. And they'd get me some names, and I just have to persuade those people. And then, you know, there'll be a few people, and they'll decide which one of them it's going to be that we'll get behind. It sounded so simple. Oh, my goodness. A hate campaign began. They were going to get dirt on me from that moment. So this is really when I started to understand politics at its best.
How did you overcome that? How did you get through that? Because what we're trying to do is empower women to get involved. And to be honest, yes, we're talking about politics, but if we think of any other sector, especially somebody trying to get promoted, you know, move up and move forward, there is sometimes that kind of animosity or jealousy that happens. well, it's just in different settings. It's just because politics is a bit more out there.
Well, absolutely true. And I mean, I think there's a couple of things there. First one is, and I want people to hear what I've said, is that I was going there with the relevant issues. For me, for people who worked for the council, for people who were next door neighbours to me, we might have been unhappy about things on the streets. We might have been, unhappy about the dog poo because our children might have picked it up. Goodness knows. But the thing is, the idea that there's somebody who is fashioned, namely a male who knows much more about how things should be, the decisions we should be making at a local level, a national level, it is completely ridiculous. The things that they are talking about are the things that we as women are dealing with on a day-to-day basis and are actively dealing with, perhaps in a way that hasn't even touched them. So, where I'm talking about the school governor situation, they would oversee what that's all about. But I was in there being part of that governing body, seeing what happened to those decisions, having a daughter at school who was bullied, knowing they didn't have policies, and being able to go into a council meeting and then say, you need anti-bullying policies for all the schools. I don't know if it's just my school that doesn't have it. Mine was a Catholic school, we didn't believe things like that happened there. But I was particularly talking about racist bullying. So there was never brought attention to. So, I'm proud of saying that we were able to do things like that. So the first message about that entangled little story I gave you was I had things to bring there. I was part of that meeting and I was welcomed in that meeting in terms of my voice because of the things that I was talking about. So they did connect with them because I now know they would have had a profile to be dealing with all those things. Somebody would have been dealing with health and social care. Somebody would have been dealing with the environment issues. Somebody would have been dealing with transport. Somebody else was dealing with children and young people. So actually, I think I'm coming there with a bundle of things because I'm just a woman and what do I know? And nobody's giving me anything the other side. So I'm just going there with what I can see. I was bang on point. I was already a politician. I was the right politician to be in that room. And yes, I never knew it. And so much so that somebody else could see that. People who were real politicians could see she's got a future. She could be on the council. Enough to encourage me to stand for that position. I mean, as it happened, I was being used. I learned that lesson really quickly. You have to be smart. Look at what's around. Who asked you? Why did they ask you? Who's the incumbent? Stuff like that I didn't know. It turned out that the position I was going for was somebody already in that position. So if somebody's in that position, you then, you're going to have to go up against them. I had campaigned for the person who was in the position. So it was ludicrous. I'd put leaflets through my own door and the doors of my estate for this person. So it's like, what have I done? And I couldn't back turn it. But I learned fast. That experience was wonderful for me. And I would not change a thing because I never experienced anything like it again. From there, I took a slow burn process to understand what all the terms were about, what the different meetings were, how I could contribute differently to each one, and what I could really bring to bring a polished version of the raw experience that I was taking there. And it's just that polished version really that makes you into a politician, is that you kind of thought about it beforehand, the issue you want to bring. Maybe you've done a little bit of research, that you can throw in some statistics if you're going to say something about schools, and it just validates your argument. So really, I'm essentially still doing the same thing. I've spoken to 3,000 people. I've spoken to all of a party conference in the past, and I have not been daunted by that, because for me, this was my opportunity to get the decision makers at the top making the right decisions in Parliament for us at a grassroots level. So it all connected, but I had to learn that lesson, and I learned that over a good 10, 12 years period before I tried to stand again.
You know
now,
what?
I could proudly say I'm part of, I've done training with the Bernie Grant Leadership course,
which is awesome.
The Future Candidates course. The other one was sort of a Dawn Butler thing. The Future Candidates course had all the top table of Parliament involved and supporting people, especially women of colour like myself, to get forward, because we do face additional barriers. And that's something that we still fight for in BAME XYZ party.
Yeah. I mean, because I've let you flow there because we've slightly gone over time, but no, it was extremely relevant. It flowed really well, because the positive out of this is that you've learned a lot, and you know about the process. A couple of things I want to say before I wrap with you, Elizabeth, is that women are the boots on the ground, knowing what's going on. Yeah. Very Dad's Army.
Very, very correct.
But women are the boots on the ground, and
yes.
And then some of us with the voice taking that up and really pressing and putting our shoulder to the wheel to make sure that it gets filtered up, and something is done about it. It's really important that the school with the anti-bullying policy, and maybe it's on the agenda at the governor's conference, because I was a governor for 9 years and used to stand up in the borough that I live in as the only black governor in the room of about 400 governors, and standing up and saying X, Y, and Z, this, that, and the other. And I challenged, and I went, don't roll your eyes. This is important.
This is important.
Oh, it's her again. Do not roll your eyes.
Do not roll your eyes. Roll your eyes or look up at the ceiling. It's up at the ceiling. Oh, God.
Oh, she's talking about the thing again. And it's just like, no, don't do that. So you've said some really important things. And another thing is that there was no onboarding for you. So there was no onboarding, and this is where 50/50 Parliament come in with some of the things that we're doing with the Amplifying Muted Voices, just sort of getting people to air. And when we do some of the in-person events, there's some little projects we can get them to do, but also as well the existing things that we've got.
Oh yes, I mean,
for them
to hold a little surgery,
to get involved in and to understand, that will act like an onboarding for them.
Absolutely. And now those resources are really available. They weren't so much there. I didn't even know where to look. So I think that's a crucial part of the process, because people could be in the same position as I am, being asked to do something and not even knowing where they get their information from. Now, as I say, great improvements on that. And there are resources that we can use. But I'm all for surgeries, talking people through the paperwork so it's less daunting.
Thank you so much for now, Elizabeth. You go and have a cup of tea, and I'll get hold of you later on. Oh, look, you've got one already. That was brilliant. Thank you so much. Wow. I call her, she's a bit of a firecracker, isn't she, to be honest? And then someone who I've met recently, I've only known her a month, but I think we magically connect. And it's the wonderful Carmen Woodhope. There you are. How are you?
Hi, Carol Ann. I'm great, thanks. And thank you so much for inviting me on your podcast.
Oh, do you know what? It's just that we met a month ago, didn't we?
You did.
And when you came to well-behaved women seldom make history.
True,
And you're out there. Internet Movie Database. I'm going to throw that little thing in there. You in a program or something?
Internet Movie Database.
I'm sure I've seen you. You've been on telly.
Don't think I've been on telly.
Oh, right. Well, okay. I'm going to send you a link. I've seen a thing,
Has
and I'm like,
AI'd me. I hope they've made me look fabulous, darling.
well, put it this way: under your name, it goes party goer. And I'm like, oh, that's really good.
That's exciting. I need to see this.
Yeah, no, you must. So you are now a WEP council candidate in Salford. Which part of Salford?
Weaston Seedley.
And are you from Weaston Seedley?
I live in Weaston Seedley now. I've lived in Salford for a very long time.
Yeah.
I teach in Salford quite a bit. Teach all over because I'm a supply teacher now. But that's where my focus is in education and community. Children.
So tell me about your journey. How did you become the council candidate? Because of course some of our listeners will want to understand from, you're an educator, and how did that happen?
Yeah. So I've been a teacher for 32 years, and then I've been a union rep, and from there became a member of the organising forum for the NEU. So I was on the leadership organising forum when I was a leader in school. And then when I became a supply teacher, I was stood for and was voted in as the supply organising forum officer for the Northwest. So very much involved in the union. Just recently been at the conference in Bournemouth for the union. I'm very passionate about education and about supporting teachers, TAs, and people who work with children in schools. So my focus is very much education based. I had no idea I would ever be standing as a council candidate or involved in politics in that sense. But working in schools, certainly over the past 14 years, I have seen a great change, and not for the better. And that becomes very concerning. And it certainly becomes concerning when, like me, you've got grandchildren, because you're looking always at the future, about what the future is going to hold for them. And that became more so after the pandemic. Anyone who works in schools, colleges, universities understands the really bad impact that COVID had on mental health, and then cuts and cuts and cuts. And then over the past 5 years, working in inner city schools in Salford and in Greater Manchester, when you're seeing children coming to school with duct tape holding their shoes together, and you can see physically that they are only having one meal a day.
Yeah.
And you can see that teachers are bringing in bags of breadsticks, they're bringing in clothing. When you're in January and February and it's freezing and you've got children in thin jackets and no tights, or, very poor clothing that's not sufficient for the weather we have. That's not what parents are choosing to do. That's parents and carers who have not got the money, who are relying on food banks. And instead of it becoming less, it's growing. We have 360,000 children in Salford alone, according to Caritas, who are now living in poverty. So you get to the stage where you think, I'm looking at traditional parties and I can't see a change coming, and I'm not hearing what I want to hear about how these children, who are our future, are going to be supported. And the party that I choose to be a part of is talking about community, is talking about education, is talking about funding proper social care within our communities and looking at education. So that
resonated with you.
Yes.
Yeah.
And when I was asked
Because it goes back to what I'm saying about women having the boots on the ground.
Yeah.
And observing, not ignoring what's going on, observing, taking it in and thinking, this has got to change.
It's true. And when I went to the 50-50 event, you said something that really made me smile, because it's something I'm saying all the time. You said, if not you, who? If not now, when? Do you remember saying that when you were talking?
Yeah, because it comes from John Lewis, who is a civil rights leader. He marched with Martin Luther King. He died only a year or two ago, quite recently, and he said that, because we can procrastinate and say, oh, that's terrible, shout at the radio, shout at the TV, and go, that's awful, and not do anything about it. And it's like, it's about time.
Yeah.
We step
so
forward.
the opportunity came about, and I thought about it. I mean, it's quite a scary time to be a woman in politics, especially to be either a woman of colour or to be a woman who is a feminist and is very open about and very clear about feminist politics. So you do have to think about it, and you do have to make sure that the people around you support you and understand why you're doing it. And I'm very fortunate that I have got that. So yes, it's literally boots on the ground for us at the moment, because we're doing a great deal of campaigning and having great conversations. So yeah, that's my journey, really. It's all of it is always going to be through the mirror, the prism of education.
Yeah, and you kind of answered part of my question, my next question, but I'm going to ask it you anyway, because we're looking at the council chambers and we're looking at Parliament. Why do you think we need more women in Parliament, and why should more women put themselves forward?
Well, the first thing I'd say is, if you look at the state of Parliament at the moment and the amount of men who are not living up to the promise of being, shall we say, how can I say this politely, to uphold the standards that Parliament and the country and the people who vote you in would expect, I think it becomes quite clear why having at least 50-50 parity is good. I think those checks and balances, different views, are very important. I also think that, when you're making policy has to be made that supports both males and females, and therefore other people who would identify as well. If you get equality for women, then you get equality for everybody. And I think it's really important that you make sure that in every decision that comes out through the Houses of Parliament or the House of Lords or whatever departments there are working, in education, in health, especially in health, where that's a whole other ballgame, that you get both. You need views from both people. You need views that encompass the whole of our population, and not 75% of the population. It's a male-dominated House of Parliament. It's a male-dominated House of Lords. It's got to be fair. It's better for everybody.
Yeah, fantastic. Right. Well, that has just been brilliant. Shall we call our partner in crime back in?
We shall, Elizabeth.
Let me just. Are you ready? See if she's ready. She's such a trouble causer.
Well, I was just peeling my spuds.
I was just peeling my spuds. See, this is what we're like. This is what we're like as women. You're multitasking, aren't you?
Well, it's glamorous here. It's all so glamorous.
Glamorous. Have you got like a bowl next to you with potato peels?
Well, because I couldn't dare go in the kitchen because I was fascinated by every word that was coming out of your mouth, if you don't mind me saying.
Thank you so much. Very kind.
I you challenged me because I am next door to you, actually live practically next door to you, though we didn't know it. And I'm in Barton upon Irwell, darling.
Oh, Barton upon Irwell.
Otherwise known as Patrick Croft. So, and that just challenges me in terms of my votes, because damn it, that's a good good platform that you stand on. I'm for everything that you said there. And as a parent of 4 who's had challenging, and but mine are all girls and grown up a bit now, I have to say, but I am a grandma, I'm a nana, and I just resonate.
You both absolutely
said.
fabulous.
Oh, absolutely, and you know, it's just fantastic that someone like you is standing. It's very important. The only thing I would change at all or want to comment is that you said if you get it right for women, you get it right for everyone. And I found that not to be true. I think, you know, historically, the movement, even the women's movement, we know that hasn't been so kind to Black women, particularly. I think we do conjoin ourselves, like I say, you know, if Gail and I were talking, I think she would come in on that because she knows that to be true. We've seen some of that along the years. But, you know, looking at what unites us rather than what divides us, we do have, I think we need to expand that phrase to think about intersectionality, to be aware of the fact that trans women are having this horrific time.
Yeah.
And I know it's contentious. Some people don't, you know, the movement itself has some issues with trans women and where they fit. When I say the movement, I don't mean the labor movement, I mean the women's movement. So, yeah, but there are other things, disability, race, that would show you that it doesn't make a fair battle just putting a woman there, because those things have been
neurodiversity.
Well, yes, you know. So I think, so I agree with you. But I tend to want to expand that phrase, because I have found that if you don't say it explicitly, then people will still ignore what you haven't sort of highlighted and underlined. And I say that to you as a teacher. And thank goodness that we have you in Salford and anywhere that you are offering your input, because you're hugely important. Of course, my union deals with, you know, support staff in schools and the TA level more than yours. I know which one yours is. And, you know, so we really do see that from the hard end, because some of that has had to be passed on to TAs who aren't as qualified as teachers to do what they're being asked to do. And they're facing terrible, you know.
Well, you know, it's the age-old story, isn't it? Any industry that is mainly staffed by women, which we call the caring industries, whether it's teaching, whether it's nursing, whether it would be, you know, people who work in care homes traditionally, they are more poorly paid than the male-dominated, traditionally male-dominated professions. And, you know, we are aware of that, and that's something that we have to work to change, because those are so important in our communities. You know, we soon found out during the pandemic, you know, where the important jobs were. It wasn't the accountants, and you know, it wasn't even, you know, in such an extent, you know, like things like the building trade, things that are very male dominated.
They all went on hold.
People who work in care homes, it was nurses. It was, again, you know, people who were working in nurseries, people who were working in schools, the female-dominated caring industries. There has to be a complete step change and a different way of looking at what really counts in our societies and what is worthwhile. What is worthwhile to make people happy, safe, and to thrive. So, you know, they're the things that I think as women, we are using our voices, all of us. And I certainly heard a lot of that when I was at the 50-50 meeting as well. And that was talking to women right across the board. That was empowering.
Right across the board. And that's really important. Working class women. But women at all levels have got that input.
And women of all different views and viewpoints. But, you know, I was talking to a woman who was Conservative Council. I was talking to Hamam Abdullah, who was at the Ancoats, who had been for Labour and then was now an independent.
I'm there.
You know, I was talking to Sophie Moreau, deputy leader of the Women's Equality Party. I was talking to a whole range of women. And that was the wonderful thing was, we had quite different views on some things, but we found common ground over the course of that day and took phone numbers and have stayed in contact. And that's really empowering. And that's, I think, very hopeful. I think that's something women are good at. We can sit down in a room when we need to, and we can find common ground and we can work it out. And that's my hope for the future, is what we do.
That's what we want with the Amplifying Muted Voices. That, you know, that was the springboard, the launch pad for that. When 50/50 have done events in Westminster, and we have a mix of MPs across the board speaking, the one thing that comes out of there, and believe it or not, is the sisterhood, especially when something happens nationally. For example, the shock of the death of the Queen, and I can't remember her name now. One of the MPs, she held the sword in the King's coronation.
Yes.
Who? Jo Cox?
No.
Who held the sword? Who was Joan of
I can't remember.
Penny Mordaunt.
Penny Mordaunt. Yeah. So
Penny Mordaunt. Oh,
yeah. So she was speaking at one of our 50/50 events. I think it was last International Women's Day, and she gave the, and quite a few of them do this, gave the example of how she just got one job, then the Queen passed away and she was given another job, but then she was only expected to be in London for so many days, so she only had outfits for so many days, and then different women from different parties were like, well, you can borrow this jacket, here's this suit. I mean, those things matter, because all of them across party were pulling together so that the nation
and we did that day. I tell you, your speakers that day really, really showed that. They showed up and showed out. And that was our main focus, was what we could do together to encourage more women to take up that voice, because I do believe we are influencing things, because we see them. You know, it doesn't matter who gets the credit, I suppose, in the end, as long as they do the work. But if we weren't bringing up the issues about children, you know, being hungry when they turn up to school, you know, simply they wouldn't be being argued in Parliament. And trust me, that whilst you talk about what was happening in the care work profession, I had been doing that, because I'm a qualified care worker as well as everything else. And I had just finished a teaching job in the colleges and wasn't working for a while, and went into care work and was doing that professionally. And how disgustingly we used to get treated really poorly, worst of wages, everything. And then COVID happened, and wow, it was like a different whole thing. You know, people were clapping on doorsteps. But then when we wanted people to turn up and give us, you know, give them, those workers, more money, because by that time I'm not in it, we struggled to get those things through. So it's us who are bringing those things forward, and we are effective. That's what I want to say. That sisterhood, that the looking at the common issues, and representing everybody's issues is what's been
and
helpful.
I think it's women who have brought onto the agenda, really highlighted the amount of violence against women and girls. And something that, you know, in the police, that misogyny has pushed to the back, pushed to the side. The Baird report's going to come out soon. I have a feeling it's going to be slightly disappointing. I think it's going to blame the administration. I think it's going to blame lack of funding. I don't think it's really going to go in hard on the misogyny that we all know as women. We all know it exists. But that is climbing up the agenda, and we are seeing other parties talking about that now. It's been spoken about in Parliament. It's been spoken about, you know, in the House of Lords. It's been spoken about on the news. You give that a few years ago, that was something that was just under the radar and nobody was speaking about. So the fact that we've been able to use our voices and whatever clout we have to make sure that that's out there, that's really, really important, because it is a huge 100%. Issue, and something that's got far worse since the pandemic, not got better at all.
Ladies, you have been absolutely amazing. And what you're saying there is it's that Chinese proverb of small raindrops will put grooves in that rock.
Oof, yes.
And that's what we are. We are the raindrops that are putting that groove in that rock. Before I go, I've got so that's our listeners. I need to put a statement out here. 50/50 Parliament is passionate about ensuring a broader range of voices within our elected bodies. We want to use these Amplifying Muted Voices podcasts, our webinars, and our in-person events to encourage women to rise, to roar, to represent. Now that came from Councillor Eve Holt. Rise, roar, represent came from Councillor Eve Holt, and I'm going to give her flowers for that because it's just amazing. I asked her,
I love Eve. Oh my
I
God.
love Eve, and can I just and I said to her, I want to weave it into this campaign, and she said yes. I'm going to get her. She's written a poem about it. I'm going to get her on to do a poem. So yes, we want you to rise. We want you to roar. We want you to represent. Rise, to aim for the Palace of Westminster and Council chambers. To roar, so your voice and lived experience can be heard and seen, and to represent their community, cultural heritage, and gender. This is Amplifying Muted Voices. Carmen Woodhope, Elizabeth Cameron, you have been absolute queens. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, it has been fantastic. And I'll see you both soon.
Hopefully.